Good morning. It's 4:30 in the morning on 17th October 2019. We are going to be talking a pretty important topic which confirms me once again that the people, those who are sitting at the senior designations in senior authorities like International Monetary Fund, they seriously lack knowledge. Now this is today's newspaper. We have live mail. In this we got news on the very first page that cut rates reform more to revive economy, International Monetary Fund. Well, before moving further, I would like to let you know that this video would be raising a pretty critical issue about the rate cut by the RBI. Also link this with the ID and the CD ratio. Now I'm not sure how many people, those who are watching this video, ever heard about ID and CD ratio. Well, ID stands for investment deposit and CD stands for credit deposit ratio. Not in an ideal scenario. In majority of the scenarios, ID plus CD has to be 1. So the total ID ratio plus CD ratio has to be 1. But India is always a different case. Third thing we would be covering that how it actually creates an impact on which is known as the immunization framework of the bank. Although while sharing this video, we also understand that the Indian banks lacks immunization. Like if you talk about Goldman, who's sitting on around $43 trillion of the derivative book. If you talk about JP Morgan Chase, whose book is not less than $43 trillion, and Citi also almost same place. They all three have the best immunization model in the globe. It is said that immunization model is of two types. One is the gross and one is net. Now the gross immunization model means that you add both the total asset and the total liabilities, while in the net you net off that. It is said that. But I am always of the opinion of the gross immunization model, and in fact the big boys of the globe like Goldman and all, they are also of the similar opinion to have gross immunization. Eventually we have seen that the gross immunization would end up having a lot of benefits compared to the net immunization. But anyways, so the part 1 of the video is today's newspaper. You can see that we got a news from IMF. It said that India should opt for further monetary policy easing and broad-based structural reform to reverse a cyclical demand slowdown. I think the head of the chief economist of the IMF is the Geeta Gopinath. Madam Gopinath or Geeta, whatever your name is, that if you have 5 minutes, you give me call. My number is +91 9899242978. In case you cannot call internationally, we can have a talk on the Skype. My Skype is Rahul5327. It is well known, it is in the public domain. I would like to check that which economic theory told you that India is actually facing a cyclical demand slowdown. I think Geeta Gopinath need to first understand that India is nowhere facing a slowdown. India is on the bank of the bankruptcy. You are on the brink of the bankruptcy. And one example is this. Although we not deliberate this, but the VTB, I don't know how many people know about that, but VTB is a pretty large financial institutions we have in Russia. They have some or another interest in India also, that I cannot tell you much, but the VTB, which holds roughly 10.5 to 11% stake in Z Group, Z Entertainment specifically, they are selling this up. And now the so-called Chandra, who used to give the motivational speeches while come on the media, is trying hard that VTB will not get this done. Because if VTB get this done, then we going to get lose about that. India is on the verge of the bankruptcy, and you are talking this as a cyclical demand is clearly suggests that either your knowledge level is zero or either you are paid. Either of that. I can give you 50-50. 50% is your knowledge level, 50% you are paid. But the job not yet over. I repeat again, India should opt for further monetary policy easing and the broad-based structural reforms to reverse a cyclical demand slowdown. The International Monetary Fund said on Tuesday, while slashing the growth rate projections to the country to 6.1 versus the previous of 7%. We already made a video, we're not going to speak much about that. Whenever you give an estimate, you have to be very particular, and estimates are plus minus this. Like today, if some client come to me and say that I want this work to be done, we always say 20 days plus minus 5 days. I don't know how many people are good with econometrics, but if you are good with the econometrics, you should know that econometrics always make fan charts. And this is the beauty of the fan chart, that it lets you know plus minus 5%, plus minus 10%, maybe more than that. But unfortunately, International Monetary Fund is not sure about that. Maybe they have better knowledge. In India, the growth softened in 2019. In India, the growth softened in 2019 as the corporate and the environmental regulatory uncertainty, together with concern about the length of the non-banking financial sector, weighted on demand, and so on, so and so forth. Well, if you talk from IMF angle, the moral of the story is coming, whether they have knowledge or they do not have the knowledge, they are asking for the more rate cut in India. The governor also said that if requires, they would cut in December. While it's just a hint, I'm sure he's going to cutting in September. We're now at 5.15%, and I'm sure that he's going to be cut up to roughly 4.7% this time, and eventually by June 2019 we are actually to 2020 we are heading up closer to 4.5% repo rate, and this would hit the investment industry pretty hard in India, and I tell you that the carry rate would gone. Carry trade has already evaporated in India. It is just like a glacier that after every few days the glacier in some part of the globe is being melted, but 1 out of 100 glaciers is being reported in the media, right? And we tend to believe that nothing concrete is happening. Now the moral of the story is that one side, International Monetary Fund is giving a stamp to Reserve Bank of India that you should continue to cut the interest rate, and this is a cyclical slowdown. Another thing which no one wanted to talk is this, which is once again the lack of knowledge, and see this. One reason that banks hasn't able to cut interest rate in line with the repo rate is the high credit deposit ratio, which is known as CDR. Well, can anyone let me know that when was the last time when the transition mechanism of the monetary policy? I think the writer failed to understand the difference between the transition impact or the pass-through effect. I think in the last 30-35 years, pass-through impact never works in India. Never works in India. It was Y.V. Reddy, it was Raghuram Rajan, it was Urjit Patel, and now it is Mr. S.T. The pass-through impact never works in India. And the hard reality is that never ever RBI also tried to make sure that the pass-through impact works. Now the fact of the matter is that your knowledge level is so poor that rather than mentioning pass-through impact, you are mentioning CDR, which is credit to deposit ratio, and you forgetted ID, which is investment deposit ratio. Forget, because people, those who are reading this newspaper, they don't have knowledge. How many of you, tell me, read this section of the newspaper carefully and criticize the media that this is half information? Half information is missing. But this is half information, but this is our media, and this is the knowledge of our media that who believes giving you half information but thinks that they are doing a pretty credible job by giving you the half information. But anyways, if you read carefully that the credit to deposit ratio is the ratio of the total loans given by banks divided by the total deposit. Everyone know? For every 100 rupee bank raise at deposit, they need to maintain 4 as a CRR, cash reserve ratio. So they left with and invest minimum 18.75 in the SLR. So total is roughly 23. Rest 77 they will give out. Now it is saying that at the beginning of the 2019, the CDR was 77.6%. CDR was 77.6%. Now let's come to the point. The important point is that Indian banks do not have a professional setup which is known as immunization. Although on paper every bank is having one, which is ALCO, Asset and Liability Committee. But had it been Asset and Liability Committee being effective, India might not have saw the huge amount of non-performing asset. There is a current wave of non-performing asset which is coming, which suggests that around 1 trillion INR is the gross non-performing asset we have in the agriculture sector. 1 trillion INR is the total gross non-performing asset in the agriculture sector, and it is growing. Now let's talk the third part. If RBI will continue to cut the rate, you cut the rate to 0%, it doesn't matter to me. If RBI will continue to cut the rate, then this would have an impact on the immunization policies of the few private banks. Although Yes Bank, ICICI and Axis, all three are not in the news for good reasons. And today we get to know that Yes Bank, Rana Kapoor, the great entrepreneur of the globe, cut basically his stake, which was around 12% in the bank, now reduced to 0. Did any newspaper told you that how come Rana Kapoor able to solve the entire stake from 12% to zero in front of the regulators when we saw the incidents like PMC Bank, and we know that Yes Bank can do anything for money now. Yes Bank is ready to sell at any level provided they need the money. And by the time we are speaking, we know the share price of the Yes Bank as well. But nonetheless, the banks never had a good committee like ALCO Asset and Liability Committee. In the absence of this committee, it would be difficult for the bank to link their value, to link their products using the external benchmarks. We already know that India never had any, on paper you have INBMK curve, which is Indian benchmark curve. I would like to ask one question from everybody, and the winner will get 200 Singapore dollars from our company. How many how many benchmark curves we have worldwide? So one of the benchmark curves is INBMK and Reuters and Bloomberg, which is Indian benchmark curve. How many benchmark curves we have worldwide? You need to give me it's a total right answer. Now, apparently speaking, Indian banks never invest in Indian benchmark curve. Indian public sector banks are having almost 0% exposure in the OIS, overnight index swap. And now the situation is worse that they have a huge amount of non-performing assets. They have a hell lot of excuses which they can give. Since the immunization, I would say instruments, just like benchmark curves, just like OIS, just like IRS, just like CCS, just like swaps, just like caption, just like I would say flow rate, cap rates, range. Majority of these instruments are not being used in India by the banks, and whatever available, which is OIS and the benchmark, they not been used. So RBI will continue to cut the rate, but the retail person will never get the benefit of that. This is what media tell, but the hard reality is that this would have negative or reverse proportional impact to the asset and liability, to the immunization of the bank. So very simple example, I'm paying 6.5% to somebody, and RBI repo rate is 4.75%. Now I'm paying more, but I had not linked this with the benchmark curve. None of the banks are named, which is Yes Bank, Axis, ICICI and all, wherein a section of the liability, even a section of the liability is linked with the benchmark curve. Can I get the benefit? The amount which I am paying to somebody is actually the same which I was paying earlier, even though RBI cut the rate. But the amount I am charging from a customer, that I am going to change. Now we need to look these and four things holistically. Number one, International Monetary Fund stamped India to cut the rates, and this suggests that where they actually stand in terms of knowledge. Citing Indian problem as a cyclical demand problem suggests that International Monetary Fund, especially the Geeta Gopinath, needs a training, immediate training. Second problem is that the India CD and ID, it should not be CD, it should be CD plus ID. ID stands for investment deposit, CD stands for credit deposit. So the total of ID plus CD has to be 1 in an ideal context except India. So in that case, the immunization framework of all the banks of the globe, including the big boys like Goldman, JP and Citi, lies on the ID plus CD. That's for sure. While if RBI will continue to cut the rate, it will definitely have a reverse impact on the immunization of the banks, as none of the liabilities of these banks are linked with the benchmark curve. The reason is pretty clear, because the benchmark curve of the India is not a liquid curve, because we never thought about it. We never thought about it. Henceforth, it is not a liquid curve. Henceforth, bank really not wanted to invest. But even if a curve which we have, which is OIS, overnight index swap, which is to an extent liquid curve, banks are reluctant in investing that also, because banks do not have competence to know how to invest in the OIS curve. Had it been, Indian banks would have offered the OIS linked product to the Indian customer. But if you go to RBI and say that, can you offer OIS product to the Indian retail customer, the bank will look, RBI will say, hey, what is OIS? First tell me this. I will make a committee. I will invite Saviran Chaturvedi. I will invite Sajid. Those who themselves do not know what is OIS, but they will be a part of the committee. So ultimately there is a movement which is happening in the system, that today the problem for Reserve Bank and the country is the non-performing asset. But after 2 years, you take my words, after 2 years, the same bloody corrupt and competent media will tell you that the problem would be more exaggerated, and this time it would be the immunization failure. The banks are moving as an immunization failure. But by the time, just like non-performing asset, by the time we realize this mistake, the banks were gone. And this time, even yes, ICICI, Axis or any other private sector bank need pretty good competent people on the board to understand these things. So apparently speaking, while these paid institutions like International Monetary Fund, who in the doing business ranking giving huge rank to India, while the same World Economic Forum is in the competitive rank is degrading India by 10 more points. The problem here is very simple, that these people are paid to a level that they are giving you information which is actually not true. But the reality is something else. And soon you will realize that a young kid of 35 told you long ago that Indian banks is negatively proportional to the immunization, which is because a steep cut in the repo rate by Reserve Bank of India. With this, we thank you very much. You know my mobile number, which is +91 and Indian code 9899242978. You know our fixed income platform, www.fixedincome.global. And don't forget, if you are a competent person, you have a zeal to learn, you do not respect the status quo, and especially by these paid people like Geeta Gopinath, we have a WhatsApp group for you. And don't forget, in case you want the daily news from our side, we have a WhatsApp newsletter. You can join that. Have a good time and talk soon.